API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it's a standardized way for two or more computer programs to communicate with each other. Let me explain how an API call works. When you make an API call in Cloud Shell, you can use the AWS CLI or a software development kit to make a request. In this instance, we're using AWS CLI. AWS CLI takes the commands you entered into Cloud Shell, adds your credentials, and sends an API call on your behalf from Cloud Shell to an AWS API. Cloud Shell already has your credentials. Those represent your identity, and your identity is who's making the AWS request. So in this instance, the API talks to the AWS S3 service and says, I need a list of all the S3 buckets that this AWS identity has permissions to list. The S3 service then sends the API a list of your S3 buckets, and the API sends that response back to you. So the process is call and response, and the API functions as a middleman that standardizes this method of communication. But the complex processes going on behind the scenes that makes this possible are handled by the CLI, or by a software development kit. It's important to talk about APIs because Amazon was one of the early pioneers of API use. In fact, APIs are the reason AWS is even possible. Let me explain. In 2004, Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, issued a mandate to Amazon employees that included these 7 points. Number 1, all teams must expose their data and functionality through service interfaces. Number 2, all teams must communicate through these interfaces. Number 3, no other form of inter-process communication is allowed. Number 4, it doesn't matter what technology you use. Number 5, all service interfaces should be designed to communicate with the outside world. Number 6, anyone who doesn't do this will be fired. And number 7, thank you. Have a nice day. Seems a little passive-aggressive at the end, doesn't it?
I'm afraid so.
So why did Bezos issue this mandate? Amazon was growing. Think about how big Amazon is now. How many teams you need to run a company that large? All of these different teams have their own systems, their own data, and they need to be able to communicate with other teams. They need to be able to access another team's systems or another team's data. The best way to achieve this is with a standardized communication process. Now there's one point in the Bezos mandate that was a real game changer. It was a revolutionary idea that paved the way for the next generation of startups and enterprises. We're talking about point number 5. All service interfaces must be designed to communicate with the outside world. That's the point that made AWS possible. That's what allowed Amazon to offer their infrastructure capabilities to the world.